Good evening. Welcome to the 2020 US Rowing Annual Convention, and thanks for joining us for our keynote speaker tonight. We want to thank Row 360 for sponsoring our program this evening. And before we get started, I just want to underscore that this is a learning environment, and you're encouraged to use the chat area for some thoughtful and kind comments and discussion. But I really encourage you to be present, sit back, listen, and think about what our speaker has to say tonight. Please use the question and answer area to ask Arshay any questions that you'd like to, and we'll be sure that Arshay wraps up in enough time to get to some of them. And if we don't, I'll be putting into the chat a Q&A spreadsheet where you can enter your information and Arshay will answer them later. And we'll make sure that gets out to everyone who's attended tonight. So about our speaker. There are people that you meet and you know right away that they're going to make an impact in your life in a truly meaningful way. I thank Richard Butler for introducing me to Arshay, and I'm grateful, really grateful for all the work that he's invested in our sport. And I'm, and the incredible positive change he's had on our entire rowing community. For those of you who already know Arshay, I probably don't need to introduce him any further, but I'm going to anyway. Arshay is a rower. He's also a new dad, an award-winning author, a motivational speaker, and an activist, particularly around the issues of accessibility for low-income families. Arshay works with the George Pocock Foundation and A Most Beautiful Thing Inclusion Fund to bring rowing to under-resourced communities. USRowing is proud, and we're excited to turn this over to Arshay, who'll share with us his experience and lessons from the Boathouse.
Hey, thank you, Deb. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I am super excited to be with you all tonight. I want to thank Amanda and Deb and the Diversity Committee and the whole USRowing team for having me tonight. I want to thank everyone for the amazing support around the film, A Most Beautiful Thing, those who came out and purchased the book, A Most Beautiful Thing, and those who've been with me for a while, even through Sugar Water. I appreciate you all. The love has been real for me in the sport. I also want to thank those who've been there with me for a while, who has just been doing the work out there, recruiting, grinding, reaching out, giving access, giving opportunities to young people who look like me and also those who grew up like I did. I want to thank BLJ for the work that they do. I want to thank Relentless Rowing. I want to thank St. Benedict, PCR, Row New York, Row Boston, CTC, Poughkeepsie Rowing, Delta Sculling, Frank over there at Oakland Strokes. So many of you, North Star in Minnesota, Terre Haute, Indiana, Wabash Valley Crew, the Pocock Foundation, Renton Rowing, so many people who have been doing the work and believe that access and opportunity is a birthright. And that's something that I've spent my life fighting for. And it's been amazing. So I thank you all for all you do in the sport, and also for those who have always reached out, right? Or college coaches that I can reach out to and say, hey, there's a kid who don't have all the tools or all the resources, but is hungry. I want to thank, Drexel and Temple and Hobart and Robert Morris University and Williams, so many more of you that fights to make sure that their rowing team reflects the diversity on campus. And I appreciate you all. So those are all the thanks that I have, and to those I am forgetting about, forgive me. You know I love you. And it's exciting again to be here, and I've been busy this year. 2020 has has been a very busy year, right? So those who are watching or on chat, sorry if I haven't got back to your calls or your emails. I'll get back to you soon. And today is a emotional day. I'm speaking and drinking a glass of wine. I lost a friend yesterday. And I think as a sport, we should always reflect on what's happening in the world. And when something happens in the world, how do we respond, right? And so I've lost a friend yesterday, and we have lost people this year in our sport, some coaches. Uh, I know PCR lost the alumni, and some due to COVID and some due to other tragedies. We also have lost a lot of people of color in the hands of law enforcement. We have lost those in underrepresented communities, and we lost a lot of folks due to COVID. So as a sport, I just want to take just a few seconds of silence for those who we lost. Thank you. And so I am ready to dive deep into my speech tonight. Well, I wouldn't say a speech. This is more of a talk, a keynote talk. And I was asked to talk about a little bit of 2020, reflect on 2020. I was asked to talk a little bit about the lessons I learned from the Boathouse that we can use today to be an effective organization or program. And I was also asked to talk about what's going on with A Most Beautiful Thing and update. So I will start off by updating you a little bit on A Most Beautiful Thing. A Most Beautiful Thing, the success has been real. It has been awesome. Right now, we are working with members of Congress around the issue of mental health and trauma. And me and Mary and one of the producers went to the Capitol and met with members of Congress who hosted the film. And one of the things that I said was that, whenever there's a mass shooting in a suburban school, right away they send in trauma counselors, which they should, to undo what they saw. But we have people in underrepresented communities who experience these things every day, and there's no resources to social workers, to trauma counselors, even to youth development coaches, right? And so what do we do? And so there are a lot of policies that we're working on, A Most Beautiful Thing in Congress, and I'm very excited for that. Most of you know we dropped the Most Beautiful Thing shoe through FELA, which is an amazing partnership. We're now partnering with Pepsi and HBCUs to have discussions around opportunity and access and sports. We are just excited for everything that's coming up. We launched The Most Beautiful Thing Inclusion Fund with the Pocock Foundation, and we're working with Concept 2 and Hudson to help those grassroots programs that are out there. And so we're excited for all that's happening and for more to come. This year, although there has been success, it's been a very difficult year for me. When, we all saw that George Floyd, who was killed by who we all consider in this country an American hero, that someone looked into a camera, put their hands in their pocket and slowly killed a Black man. And for me, that was rough. I've seen a lot on the west side of Chicago, but that was the toughest thing I've ever seen. And it was a hard pill to swallow, because I remember these moments of being a kid who has never been suspended from school, who has never committed a crime, who has in fact showed up at school and pledged allegiance to the flag every day, who has recited the preamble, who learned the Declaration of Independence, who went to baseball games as a kid and sung the national anthem, who have done everything that they're supposed to do and still had my face pressed down on a police car numerous of times. So when people who looked like me saw that, they was reminded of their trauma, what they experienced. And I wanted to act right away. I wanted to do something. I know I've been doing a lot, but I wanted to do more. And it took me back to being a kid. Well, I don't want to say a kid, a teenager. In the year 2000, I was a senior. I was in shape. I was wrapping up my rowing career. And I got accepted to Le Cordon Bleu to be a chef. And my mentor said, hey, they want you to speak at the Juvenile Center. And I freaked out right away. I'm a senior in high school. Are the kids are they gonna listen to me? And I said, no. And then this is in the self-published version of my book, Sugar Water. I talked about this story. And my mentor said, I think you should do it. And I have just gotten over my stuttering problem. I had a real bad speech problem in middle school, but through high school, I was working on my speech. And one of the things I learned from the sport of rowing is that when you sit on an erg, I learned it very early on that what I put in, I get out. I learned that if I can practice hard and train hard before practice, during practice, and after practice, I just get better. Although there were people on the team that were stronger than me, who were taller than me, who were more talented than me, I had the best scores because I put in a lot of work. And so that same lesson as a D student in high school, I said, okay, if I can just practice my schoolwork and work hard on my schoolwork before class, during class, and after class, while everyone's hanging out, while everyone's at the mall, although they may be smarter than me, although they may be better test takers than me, but if I put in more work, like I do in the erg, that I can be a better student. So I went from a D student to a top 10 student. And that's the same thing I did with my speech. I just worked on it when I was at home all the time. And here I am. My mentor says, we need you to speak. And so I go to the Juvenile Correctional Center. I walk in and I see all these Black and Hispanic men sitting in their chairs, young kids, staring at them, right in their eyeballs as they stare at me. And I remember closing my eyes and just started speaking on my life, on my brother's life, my mom's life, and how I accomplished many things through sports, through cooking, and how I am a leader as a 18-year-old kid. And then I remember saying, okay, that's it. It was a very quick speech and everyone was quiet. And I remember walking out and some kid said, hey, Arshay. And I turned around and it was my friend Donald from middle school. I haven't seen him since middle school. And the security guard grabbed him by his shirt and said, I told you that you can't talk, no talking. And they pushed me out of the room. And I remember Donald, he was the kid who would buy bread and he would buy crackers just to feed pigeons and birds as a middle school kid. And I remember going to my mentor and said, the system has failed us. What went wrong? What happened? They're treating these kids like animals. This kid was a good kid. And I made a decision that year to not go to Le Cordon Bleu, but to dedicate a year of my life to full-time service with AmeriCorps in my community. I had to act. I had to do something. And the theme of this conference is let's get better. And I told my mentor that day, we have to get better. Let's get better. What bothered me about this story is this, is that for so long, for so very long, every movement I was a part of, most major movements in this country that was birthed has been birthed on the death, the mistreatment, and the expense of someone who looks like me. And that crushes me. And so when you see people out there who are marching, who are angry, who are fighting, it's because they feel this way. And I think that as a sport, it is time to have these conversations. I have never accomplished or achieved anything great being comfortable. We all know as rowers, when we sit on the erg and we're about to do our 2K, to get the results that we want, we are uncomfortable the whole time. To get to where we need to be, it takes about 6 minutes or 7 minutes of discomfort. And I believe to move forward, we have to have the uncomfortable conversations. To achieve anything great, there has to be some discomfort, but it's going to help us to where we need to be. Most of my chatting today is not just about rowing. It's a little about rowing, but it's about where we are today as a people, as an individual. Now, I spoke at the Joy of Sculling conference last year as a keynote, and then I did a few workshops. And in the workshop, I've asked every coach, collegiate coach, master's coach, juniors coach, middle school coach, every coach. I said, in one word, what is the top thing in one word that you learned from your coach? What is that one thing in one word? What is that top thing that you learned from your coach? And I've heard words like unity, teamwork, commitment, resilience, patience, courage, perseverance, joy, leadership, partnership, courage, selflessness, other. Most of these coaches have won medals, have been Olympians, have done many different things and accomplished so much in this sport, but not one person, not one coach said feathering, launching, erging, rowing, rigging. Why? Because it's more than rowing. The sport brings so much more and it enriches our lives in so many ways. And every young person, no matter where they're from, deserves to learn those lessons that everyone mentioned in that room. And there's been times in my life or working with programs like CTC or Row New York or Row Boston, where you hear people look at young people in that sport and don't consider them a real rower. I had someone tell me last year, the head of the school, go, "Oh, you was a part of that PET project," in front of me and some of my teammates. And it was, oh gosh, it was very disturbing. And this came from a college coach. And right away I thought, like, I ripped apart my hands. I had back injuries. I showed up every day and it wasn't considered a real sport. And I think as coaches, especially the ones who want to go into communities and diversify their programs and bring young people in and run their organization with their ideas, we need to think about how we measure success. How the community measures success. One of the coaches in our film said, the kids wasn't winning. They wasn't recruited to college, and they go to college right away. We thought it was a failure. And you feel that. You don't even have to say it. Like you feel that, because most times in this sport, we measure success by medals and winning and being a national team member, where you recruited to. But the way my community measures success, a community that dealt with so much trauma, a community that dealt with a lot as a result of Jim Crow laws and segregation and redlining, measure success by these group of guys who took an 1.5 hour bus trip on public transportation to show up and practice. Commitment. We did that. That's some of the words that the coaches mentioned. They measure success by these young guys culturally overcoming the fear of water and learning how to swim. that took courage. We measure success in our community by courage. Most of the guys said that. We also was a group of guys who did get along at first, but we built a brotherhood, a partnership. We became leaders, and we were selflessness. We showed a lot of selflessness. And our community measure our success through that. And some of these collegiate coaches mentioned that. And so it's rough when someone looks at a program that really focus hard on young people who normally wouldn't have access to the sport and don't look at them as real rowers. I say to those people, let's get better. What I want to do is I want to read a Instagram message that I got from a Black man named Doug from Philadelphia. Now, this message I probably sent to most of you who are a friend of mine on the chat because I couldn't stop thinking about this message. I mean, this is the kind of message that keeps me going. I must have read it 100 times. It's very short, but I've read it so many times. I couldn't stop thinking about this guy. And it says, I am in the back of my truck reading the last pages of A Most Beautiful Thing, crying quietly behind my sunglasses. Your story is my story. Thank you for sharing it. I used to run by the Boathouse in Philly, dreaming that I was a rower at Temple. I stand in all the white spaces and I feel their stares. I feel their stares. I have drug addict uncles. I know the depths of Black ambition. I hope to stand with you one day. Thank you. I couldn't stop thinking about this message. Doug from Philly. He's an adult now, but his dream was to row at Temple. And I asked myself, why couldn't he just get access? Why did he just dream? There's so many boathouses there. Why couldn't he just walk in? I think about Doug. I remember growing up in community centers. We had about 5 community centers. And in all those community centers, the staff reflected the diversity in that community. And every last one, I could walk in and play chess or play basketball or just be a part of whatever activities that was happening there. I was able to have access. They believed that access was a birthright. And now I think about Doug, that he didn't get that opportunity to be a rower. I think about another person. Her name is Myasia. May of 2018 in Jersey, at the Mother Day Regatta, she was called the N-word in Rosa Parks by an opposing team. You can look up this article anywhere. She was the only person of color on her team. They raced the opposing team. She took the jitney bus back. She was alone, and she was called Rosa Parks, and she was called the N-word. And that crushed me. And I remember reaching out to her mom. I remember reaching out to Brendan and David Banks and saying, we have to do something. And for me, a girl, Black girl who got calluses, who signed a USRowing waiver, who had back injuries, who wore JL gear, a Black girl who shared our sports DNA, experience that at a regatta, didn't feel protected. And at that moment, I began to dive deeper into my experience and what it was like for me as a rower. And also now reflecting on those who I've talked to this year, who is Black, who have told me their stories at regattas. And it brings back so many feelings. The feeling of walking into your boathouse and none of the images on the wall looks like you in your house, in your boathouse. Brings back the memories of having the oldest boat in the city to row in, and the most novice coach in the city to coach you. But being so determined, but not quite as being fast as the other boats, it can't quite get into a school because of that. It reminds me of sharing the Boathouse with private schools, kids who have never had a conversation about race with their coaches. It reminds me of being at the Boathouse every day in a training session in your Boathouse and feeling like every day you was at a away game. It brings back that feeling of telling your coach that someone says something racist to you, and the only thing that they can tell you is to be the bigger person. It brings back that feeling of being a part, or hearing stories of people being a part of a diverse rowing program. And they are interacting with teammates who don't look like them, and they're learning so much from each other. But when the brochures go out, there's only photos of the Black kids. And you're asking why? Why not my teammate who works so hard next to me? You begin to think about being at your Boathouse in a space where tragedies happen in the country, like COVID and 9/11, and the whole team reflects and they talk about it. And then maybe there's a terrorist attack in another country, and you go on social media and you see that everyone at that Boathouse or in that space changed their profile pic to the color of the flag in that country in remembrance. But when you see a Black man or woman who is wrongfully killed by law enforcement, or those who we consider American hero, the complete space in Boathouse is silence. When I read this, I become conflicted, because I'm thinking about Doug. Do I work hard and go to cities like I normally do to give people like Doug access to the sport? And then I think about Myasia and her story. Or maybe I just do those future Dougs a favor and not reach out because they may experience that Myasia story. These are the things that I'm thinking about every day. These are the things that I'm working on. These are the things that I am working on. These are the things I'm writing on paper. These are the talks that I'm having, the talkbacks that I'm having every day with college students from Harvard, from Yale, from Dartmouth, Princeton, to Greenwich, into those programs that are like the programs that I came from. But I realized that racism is everywhere. So it's never going to stop me from reaching out and giving young people access. But what I say to those who have seen it, let's do better. It's not just about recruiting, but it's about creating a Boathouse culture that all can feel welcome. The biggest lesson I learned in this sport is that I can't do the work of 8 people, but I need 8 people to do the work. And then we'll get there much faster. Rowing in color can't do it alone. Row New York can't do it alone. Arshay Cooper can't do it alone. BLJ can't do it alone. We need the whole 8. We need Concept 2. We need NRA. We need USRowing. We need everyone to move this boat to get there much faster. And I think it's been too long. And I think now is the time to act. And that's why I love that saying, let's get better. I feel like if a group of people can come together many years ago and take metal and fold it in half and fly it over the Atlantic Ocean and call it an airplane, we can figure out how to diversify the sport. The history of sport have taught us in this country that although Many sports have made a significant impact in the world in some way. None has entirely reached its goal without the power of diversity. That not even became mainstream without diversifying the sport. And I always say that one of my favorite photos of all times is this turtle that was sitting on a fence. And right away I said to myself, okay, that turtle didn't get there alone. Someone helped. And we need everyone to be a part of this work, to figure it out, right? And do better. So what I want to do now, before we open up a Q&A, I have talked to so many colleges, so many rowing clubs, you know, corporations, and they have so many questions. And I think some of these questions I want to be able to answer. I want to read some of these questions and answer some of these questions before we open it up. But I am hoping that some of these questions I ask and I answer are questions that will help the future my ages and the future Dougs. That's my mission. You know, I think that we all have a mission as a program, and we have a personal mission. When I go to a regatta, when I look at the sport of rowing, my mission, personal mission, is to put more brown faces on the water, and that they will learn the lessons that comes with the sport. They will have the roadmap to becoming successful, the roadmap on how to be recruited or to be a successful athlete. And so these questions I want to read out to you, and I want to answer them. And these are a list of questions that I've gotten more than once. And I think they're important questions to read to you all today. Question number one is from the Diversity Committee from JP Morgan. And this group was really talented, mostly Black folks in this DEI committee, but still very diverse. This group was so passionate about change, social justice, the anti-racism movement. They just want to do more. They just want to make sure that there's equal pay, that everyone has an opportunity to grow at Chase. And their question to me was, as a company, how do we know we are there? How do we know we are where we need to be? And my answer to that was, I'm not sure. But one thing I do know is that if I can listen to the board of directors and hear them, and if I can look at them, and if I can look at the senior staff and hear the senior staff, and I can look at your group and don't know the difference between the three, you are where you need to be. I believe where you are at a point where your diversity committee is the board. It's a representation of everyone. Everyone is about this movement. Everyone is about impact. Everyone is about change. I think you are at a start to where you need to be. And I think as we think about our organizations, as we think about our board, as we think about our senior staff, right? Is it a reflection of the kids that we serve? Right? Is the talent really about the movement? And when I say movement, I think there's three different buckets. I think in this country, there's the bucket of those who are just racist, and they'll let you know that they're racist. And then I think there are those who are anti-racist. I hate it. We must stop this at all costs. We must march. We must organize, right? We must take Undoing Racism courses. We must speak out. It is wrong, and we must act. And then there's this huge bucket in the middle of those who are like, we all bleed red. I have a Black friend. I'm not racist. Let's just do good, you know? And we need that group to move over to the anti-racism bucket. And I think that when you have an organization who believes that and embrace that, and I think that we're on our way to be someone who, to be the organization that we want to be. And so, second question I want to read is, this came mostly from college students and high school students. It says that in high school, you had hesitations of joining the sport of rowing, but you did it anyway. Why did you do it? What were the biggest barriers for you and your teammates? And are they the same barriers that exist now? I think that, of course, when I walked into the lunchroom and when I saw that boat on the TV monitor and no one looked like me, I said no. It don't reflect the people that I'm used to hanging out with. But when I went upstairs and I saw Coach Victor, I saw a Black man as a coach in the room, I felt a little bit more comfortable. Because I knew I would row with people who looked like me, but to have someone in leadership showed me and my parents that regardless of that, I will be protected. And also in the 90s, there wasn't a lot of female coaches coaching boys team. And I was raised by women. Most of the teachers in our community were women, and we were comfortable with women. And so the diversity of coaches, the diversity of leadership really changed my thoughts on joining rowing. And I think that is something that's super important as we begin to think about how we want to reach out to communities and diversifying our staff. And I think, of course, there's barriers like swimming and transportation due to the system being rigged. But I think one of the things that came out in the film that I think is important to talk about is sometimes it's parents are nervous about their kids joining the sport. And for our team, it was Malcolm's dad, who said, I don't want my son rowing. And a lot of people will say, oh my God, how can you not want this opportunity for your son if I want folks to understand that Malcolm's family moved away from the South because Malcolm's mom's brother was hung on a tree. And so they moved to Chicago and fled the South. And so for his dad to release him to an all-white space in a boathouse without knowing how his son will be protected or knowing the training that maybe the coach haven't received or the relationship that's not quite fair, it is hard to deliver kids because they don't want their kids to experience what they experience. And it comes from a place of safety. And that's why it's so important before we go into a neighborhood that we begin learning about that neighborhood, learning about that community, building relationships, sitting in on committee meetings, right? Introducing yourself, not going there doing outreach, but building partnerships. Getting rid of the outreach words. No, we are here to build partnerships and moving the team forward through the community and through the sport. I'm going to open it up for questions in a couple of minutes. I got one last question that I'm going to read out that was asked, and it says, "What do you say to all white staff who wants to reach out in an underserved community and offer rowing?" And I kind of wrote down a few things on here, and again, we will talk more about this on the panel tomorrow. But what I would say is that it's not about creating the charity story, but giving access and watching people rise. I would say get trained, equipped in DEI, anti-racism training, youth development, cultural competency, and by those who provide it from that community. I would say spend time spend time on Boathouse culture before recruiting those athletes. I think one of the things that, we should do is when we go out and decide that we have a program of kids, of kids that are all white, and we go out to a community and want to recruit that we prepare the kids at the Boathouse with what you're trying to do, and prepare kids from that community on what rowing is like, and have those conversations, because those conversations are going to really push young people forward. And last few things, I would say learn and listen to the community and how they measure success, right? Kids want to be safe. Well, kids want to be safe and have a fun, thriving program, but they also want to compete as well. Making sure the staff, right, like I talked about earlier, represent the folks and the young people that we are trying to serve. When the kids say something happened at a regatta, do something. Includes parents, school contacts, community stakeholders, in any major event or decision with the athletes from the community that we are working with. I'm gonna close here, and I want to open it up for questions and chat with you guys. And so I'm gonna go to the Q&A. And if you got any questions, please send it. Jonathan Moss, have you gotten your daughter out to ERG yet? I have not. Are you familiar with helping to promote the Boys Latin High School crew team in Philadelphia? They're an all African-American crew team and has been rowing out of Vesper Boathouse. They also have a new African-American coach. A letter of inspiration and support to you, from you to them would be great. I've been doing this work for a long time, and Boys Latin in Philadelphia have 800 books at their school from me. I've spoken at their school. I visited their practice. They came to one of our sets. And yes, I am very familiar with that program. And I think that, we don't wake up tomorrow morning and say, we're going to build the most diverse rowing program ever, or we're going to be super diverse. I think we wake up tomorrow morning and we lay one brick as perfect as we can. We don't wake up and say, I'm going to build this great big wall. No, just lay one brick as perfect as you can. And every day I ask myself, how can I lay a brick? And I remember talking to Melissa, who's a referee. I'll say, listen, I've called every Black Masters rower that I know, and they want to meet with you. And being a referee is a position of power. I've heard some nasty things from referees as a kid, and I think it's important to have a diverse group of refs out there. And I set it up and I did the work. That was one brick. Every day I'm calling college coaches from young people on my Instagram to say, hey, how do I get plugged into college? I am making those calls every day. Every day, if we can just wake up and lay one brick, that's giving. That's asking USRowing, what can we do? That's working with the diversity committee. That's reaching out to some of these programs. And if we all can lay one brick every single day, we're going to have that wall that we want. And I also think that the lessons that we learn from the sport of rowing is huge. Using those lessons, not only to teach inside the boat, but outside the boat. One of the lessons that I love was the lesson of leaving the boathouse better than you found it. And every day a coach would say, leave the boathouse better than you found it. And I would say to myself, well, I didn't make the mess. But yes, leave the boathouse better than you found it, even if you don't make the mess. And that's a lesson that I've used every day in my life. How can I leave the classroom? How can I leave the speech? How can I leave the sport better than I found it? Because if you leave the boathouse better than you found it, it makes it better for the next group that comes in. It makes it easy for the next group to come in. If we leave the world better than we found it, we make it easier for the next generation, even if we don't make the mess. And now there may be people that say, hey, I have nothing to do with slavery. I wasn't there, right? That was a long time ago, and it wasn't a long time ago. But still, I feel like there's a responsibility to leave the world better than you found it, even if you personally didn't make the mess. I left the Boathouse better than I found it because I benefited from it. And I think there's a responsibility to leave the world better than you found it because you benefited from it. And I think that it's simple. We want the world, we want the sport, we want our organization to be better because we are here. And that lesson I use all the time in my life. That's the way I choose to live my life. How can you support the first athlete of color on your team? Mitigate and perceive pressure that may come from being the first. Good question from Grace. It says, how can you support the first athlete of color on the team and mitigate the perceived pressure that may come with being the first? I think that for me, I've been a person of color who rode with a team of color, but I think for that young person, it's introducing that person to your captains of the team. Who's the hardest working person on the team? Who's the person that everyone respects? Because when you walk into the Boathouse, you're gonna know who that person is. And if that person, just so simply, that captain, those young people can walk up to that person and say something like, "I see you tomorrow. I'm glad you came." I think it helps. And that's important to me, right? That I know when I walk into a Boathouse as a person of color and there was a bunch of kids who didn't look like me, it is a coach's job to make me feel comfortable. But when you have the young people, when you teach your young people, right, about, these topics, youth development or diversity, inclusion, or equity, and help them to understand that this is their house and they have to make the Boathouse warm and welcoming. And teenagers gravitate towards the young people that are coming in and make them feel welcome. You want to come back. You want to come back. And I think that's super important, that the young people learn their names, right? And sit them on an erg and work with them, right? And I think that helps. It says, how do you approach an organization serving the community of color while looking like I am offering a charity? Good question. I think that, again, before we go into that community, there are a lot of talent in those communities that you can hire that can help you, right? And they will help you win over the community, right? Again, there's talent everywhere in these communities, but it's access and opportunity that it's not just with programs, but with jobs, right? The city has failed these communities when it comes to employment, right? And I think that we can go in and we can hire them. I think one of the coolest things about the community centers was that they were hired by, the employees was like Malcolm's mother, right? And the people from the neighborhood, right? I think that works, right? And that shows that it's not really about creating charities, but you give an opportunity, right? And you run in the organization with their ideas, and there's a youth leadership group, right? And things are happening, right? And goals are being set by them. And I think that's how you make it happen. I mean, you may say it is hard to find a Black coach for my program, but go to the local gym and find a strength and conditioning coach who knows coaching, who knows about commitment, who knows the community, who knows the schools, who has relationships. Pay them to row with the masters, right? Teach them how to row. And also, they can be your coaches. They can be the strength and conditioning coach. They can help push things forward, right? We have to be creative, right? But we have to be moving with the community, right? We have to be talking with the community. Like Brandon Johnson said, participate in the community. So, and that's why I always say partnerships, not outreach, partnerships. The community they want to move with you. Remember, on our program at Manley High School, the program, the rowing program, didn't offer swimming, academic support, summer jobs. Our program, our coaches offered rowing. The academic support came from the school, right, in partnership. The swimming came from the YMCA. The summer jobs came from the SAFE Foundation. The entrepreneurship classes came from Urban Options. And it was the community collectively working to push us forward, right? And our coaches were learning from those folks in the community. And it wasn't, you know, it just, no, these are my kids, right? No one ever said these are my kids or this is Roe Arshay's kids. No, these are the community's kids. And everyone had a partnership with the young kids in the neighborhood. And we was able to know all the leaders because we had partnerships with everyone. A few more questions. Is there a few more questions? I can go back to this question. Oh, I see. I'm sorry. There's more questions. Can you share how you have sustained the battle fatigue? Oh, it's Ashley. Okay, battle fatigue. Hey, Ashley, from Relentless Rowing, who's out there, who's working really hard to grind out there in Columbus. Ashley, if you're looking for someone to support and someone who feels like they're alone in Columbus, right? If you feel like you have tools or boats that you need to give away, or oars or ergs, I hope that we can support Ashley Pryor's program, Relentless Rowing. And I think that a lot of times, and I had this conversation with University of Chicago, in our community sometimes, as Black business owners or founders of nonprofits, we battle, right, to put our kids on the water, or we fight for resources, right, and it's hard to just move with other organizations who are moving fast, who have the connections, right, and we find ourselves in a battle with folks, and I have to say, I'm not going to say what city. I went to a city and I did a Barnes and Noble's event, and I was speaking, and every boathouse, there's 4 different boathouses there, and they were all fighting with each other over kids. They were like, you know, saying like this person not doing this, and they, you know, and they will put them on blast. Like, there's so many kids in this city. There's no need to fight over kids. There's no need to battle each other, right? We all are moving in the same direction. We are one sport, and I think we need to represent our sport well. And I think we need to learn from each other. And I think that we have coaches, we have new founders out there that are really struggling, and other boat houses are giving them a hard time to move forward. But I think it's important that we support each other. And you know, one of the things I've learned through some of the speeches and some of the collegiate coaches is that they have a Black athlete, and most have one Black athlete. And they said to me, Arshay, like, you know, I talked with this athlete and they quit. They said the sport is just not for them. And I said, well, did this athlete row it in high school? They said, yes. So I said, okay, well, they know that they will have to get up early. They know that the sport is mostly white. I said, when they say it's not for them, they must be talking about the culture. And for a lot of athletes that are Black that I talk to, or if you listen to Rowing the Color, not only they're the only Black on their team, but they are interacting with 90% of the people in their boat who's never interacted with someone who looks like them. And so when they care about something like social justice, or when they post something, or when they speak out, people look at them differently, or like they're just complaining, or that doesn't matter, we're here to row. And then it affects them and they don't continue on. And that's part of the battle as well. How do we get comfortable? And I think it goes back to, in order to make sure that athletes of color stay and have that keeping power to all 4 years of college, I really believe that the interaction should happen in high school, that the programs shouldn't be separate, that they can learn a lot from each other. If the program is all white, I think that you can recruit kids and integrate them into your program. And I think it helps kids who don't look like me on the college level to understand some of the things that are happening in the world because of the conversations that we're having. But now there are places who don't want to do the work, who don't want to diversify the program, who may not hire someone of color. And then a person has to say to themselves, well, I'm just going to start a program and I'm going to work with young people because it's not being done in my city. And then when you start that, you get pushback. You're not welcome. They make it hard for you to use some of the things in the Boathouse. They make it hard for you to attend regattas. And I think that's something that really happens in the community and in the sport, and something we need to address. And we got a few more minutes, so I think I will end by saying that, again, you can talk to me anytime. I appreciate being invited to talk about the sport that I love. And I love, again, the theme, Let's Get Better. And I wanted to just read my thoughts on how I feel as a person of color, and some of the things that I've noticed, some of the things that we saw, and if we can hear these things, right, and we can address them, and we can talk about it, and we can fix it, and we can work on it. And I am going to continue to do the good work in this sport. My dream is that in 2028, that in LA, in our country, that boat reflects the diversity in this country. That's my dream. And I am doing whatever I can to support collegiate athletes. And I think we all should do it. I think we all should be organized. We should all work together to make sure that happens. And, in closing, I was talking to my mom about this speech, and we were just having a conversation, and we started talking about the way I grew up, and she was a Christian, and we would have these conversations all the time, and she would make us pray in the morning. If you read the book, we would have to pray in the morning, and she said that she would always say, it was a scripture from 1 John that God is love. God is love. And today, and she asked me about, my speeches and what's my universal message. And I said, when I look at this country, Mom, and you used to tell us God is love from 1 John, like me and my brothers and sisters, we've never forgotten that. And I think my universal message is that, I think if we can just understand that we are one nation under love, things can be better, And I know it says one nation under God, but people are confused by that. We all know that love is gentle, love is kind, love is accepting, love keeps no record of wrong. It's a beautiful thing. And if we can be one nation, one sport under love, I think great things happen, right? We're not jealous. We're not hating. We're not boastful. And so that's my life. I do a little bit of posting, some talking, a lot of listening, but at the end of the day, it's being active. I am out there doing the work, and it's just like Stacey Abrams. She's out there, she's doing the work, she's being effective, and so that's my speech. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for being here with me, and thank you, USRowing, for having me.